My dear students, today I came up with another important chapter of your book, that is the White Mouse Circus. This extract is from Roald Dahl book The Witches. The story is about a young boy and his encounter with witches. The boy, who lives with his grandmother, is due to spend his holidays in Norway, but because his grandmother falls ill, they cannot go. Instead, he is taken to a seaside hotel in England. If you have not read this book already, be sure to read it soon. So let us start with the story. The beginning plot of this story is the narrator, a small boy, was planning to go to Norway. As his grandmother fell ill, her doctor advised them to go to Bournemouth, a place visited by old people. It was believed that the bracing fresh air of Bournemouth kept old people alive for some extra years. Although the grandmother did not believe such things, she agreed to visit Bournemouth. She thought of obeying the doctor. So this is the starting plot. Now, my dear students, let us go through some important meanings before starting with the story. Here you will find a word chambermaid. Chambermaid means a maid or one who cleans a hotel room. Dotty. Dotty means slightly crazy. Bracing. Bracing means refreshing. Tommy rot means utter foolishness or nonsense. Scuttling means running or moving quickly with short steps. Next one is compromise, a settlement of a dispute in which two sides agree to accept less than the original wanted by them. Next is consolation, a source of comfort to somebody who is upset or disappointed. Relentlessly, never slackening but going at the same pace. Now let us start with the story. You just take out the book and follow the story. Rooms were booked for us in a place called the Hotel Magnificent in famous seaside town of Bournemouth. My grandmother told me was full of old people like herself. They retired there by the thousand because the air was so bracing and healthy. It kept them, so they believed, alive for a few extra years. So the narrator is saying that room was already booked in a hotel named Hotel Magnificent in the town of Bournemouth, and as it was said by her or his grandmother that here the people who used to live was the old people, and they retired there because they believed that here the air was bracing or refreshing and healthy, which kept them alive for few extra years. Does it? I asked. Of course not, she said. It's Tommy rot, but just for once I think we have got to obey the doctor. Here the narrator is asking whether it is true or not. When his grandmother replies, no, it's not. It's a Tommy rot means it's a nonsense, but for once to obey the doctor's advice they need to go there. Soon after that, my grandmother and I took the train to Bournemouth and settled in the Hotel Magnificent. It was an enormous white building on the seafront, and it looked to me like a pretty boring place to spend a summer holiday in. I had my own separate bedroom, but there was a door connecting my room with my grandmother's room. So here the narrator is saying soon after that they went to Bournemouth by a train and settled in the Hotel Magnificent, and there they found that this hotel was big and enormous white building on the seafront. It was in front of the sea, and according to the narrator this place was pretty boring to spend a summer holiday. Here he was given a separate bedroom, but there was a door which was connecting his room with the grandmother's room. Just before we left for Bournemouth, my grandmother had given me a consolation, a present of 2 white mice in a little cage, and of course I took them with me. They were terrific fun, those mice. I called them William and Mary. And in the hotel I set out right away teaching them to do tricks. The first trick I taught them was to creep up the sleeve of my jacket and come out by my neck. Then I taught them to climb up the back of my neck onto the top of my head. I did this by putting crumbs in my hairs. So here the narrator is saying that before leaving to Bournemouth, as a consolation, he was presented with 2 white mice in a little cage. He took them to the place and he named these 2 mice as William and Mary. And there, after reaching to the Hotel Magnificent, he tried to teach them some tricks. The first trick that he taught was to creep up the sleeve of his jacket and come out by the neck. And the second trick which he taught was to how to climb up by the neck onto his head. So this was the 2 tricks which was taught by him by putting crumbs in his hair. Next is, on the very first morning the chambermaid was making my bed, when one of my mice poked his head out from under the seats. The maid let out a shriek that brought a dozen of people running to see who was being murdered. I was reported to the manager. There followed an unpleasant scene in the manager's office with the manager, my grandmother and me. So here in this stanza you can see, on the very first morning when the chambermaid came to make the bed of the narrator, she found a mice which poked his head out from the seats. And here we found the chambermaid shouting in a way such that someone got murdered, and dozens of people came running to see that. And we find that a complaint was made to the manager, and thereby an unpleasant scene took place in the manager's office in front of manager, narrator's grandmother and the narrator. Next, the manager, whose name was Mr. Stranger, was a bristly man in a black tailcoat. "I cannot permit mice in my hotel, madam," he said to my grandmother. So here we find that manager's name was Mr. Stranger, who was a bristly man and he used to wear a black tailcoat. Here the manager says that he cannot give the permission to keep mice in his hotel, and this was said by the manager to the grandmother of the narrator. "How dare you say that when your rotten hotel is full of rats anyway?" After listening to the manager, grandmother said, "How dare you? You cannot allow mice in the rotten hotel where this hotel is full of rats." According to this grandmother, that is the grandmother of the narrator, this hotel was full of rats, which was said by the grandmother to the manager. When the manager said, "Rats?" cried Mr. Stranger, going mauve in the face. "There are no rats in this hotel." "I saw one this very morning," my grandmother said. "It was running down the corridor into the kitchen." So when the stranger said, or the manager said, that here rats cannot be seen and here there is no rats, when the grandmother said that today morning itself I saw a rat which was running down the corridor into the kitchen. "That's not true," cried Mr. Stranger. When Mr. Stranger said, "No, this cannot be true. You had better get the rat catcher in at once, said my grandmother. So here the grandmother is saying at once means as soon as possible you should bring a rat catcher before I report you to the public health authorities. So here grandmother is saying that if you don't bring a rat catcher, then I will report you or complain you against you about this hotel to the public health authorities. Here the grandmother continues by saying, I expect there is rats cluttering all over the kitchen floor and stealing the food off the shelves and jumping in and out of the soup. So here the grandmother is saying that I expect that here the rats are moving all over the kitchen floor and stealing the food from the shelves and jumping into and going out of the soup. Never, cried Mr. Stranger, when Mr. Stranger said no, it is not possible. Next, the grandmother said, no wonder my breakfast toast was all nibbled round the edges this morning. My grandmother went on relentlessly, no wonder it has a nasty ratty taste. If you are not careful, the health people will be ordering the entire hotel to be closed before everyone gets typhoid fever. So now the grandmother is saying that today my breakfast toast was nibbled round by the rat and it has a nasty ratty taste. So if you don't get careful, then I will complain to the public health authorities and health people will come and order to close your hotel before they all get typhoid fever. You are not being serious, madam, Mr. Stranger said. Now Mr. Stranger is saying you might be joking, you are not serious. Next, I was never more serious in my life. Now the grandmother is saying no, I was never more serious than this in my life. Means this grandmother is seriously saying these all things. Are you or are you not going to allow my grandson to keep this white mice in his room? So now the grandmother is saying that what you are going to do. Are you allowing my grandson to keep this mice or you are not allowing? What I must do? I must complain or I will just think that you are allowing this mice to stay with my grandson. The manager knew when he was beaten. Now the manager also knew that he was once beaten. May I suggest a compromise, madam? Now the manager is saying let us compromise and get into a settlement. He said, I will permit him to keep them in his room as long as they never allowed out of the cage. Now manager is saying let us compromise or get into a settlement. Next he said, I will permit him to keep them in his room as long as they are never allowed out of the cage. How's that? No, so now the manager is saying let us compromise and I will give him permission to keep these mice, but one condition, that he will not allow them to come out of the cage and out of his room. So it is favorable or not, this one is asked by the manager to the grandmother. That will suit us very well, my grandmother said and stood up and marched out of the room and with me behind her. So this grandmother agreed with the manager and she stood up and left the room and the narrator followed her. There is no way you can train mice inside a cage, yet I dared not to let them out of the cage as the chambermaid was spying on me all the time. She had a key to my door and she kept bursting in at all hours trying to catch me with the mice out of the cage. She told me that the first mouse to break the rules would be drowned in a bucket of water by the hall porter. So here we find that narrator knew that it was not possible to train mice within the cage and he was afraid to take out those mice out of the cage because the chambermaid was always looking at him, means spying on him, and she used to come into his room because she had the key to his room. The chambermaid also said him that if she finds a mouse coming out of the cage or a mouse breaking the rule first, she is going to drown that mice or mouse into the bucket full of water by the hall porter. So this was the thing which was done by the chambermaid, and due to this narrator got afraid and he was not able to take out the mice out of the cage. I decided to seek a safer place where I could carry on with the training. There must surely be an empty room in this enormous hotel. I put one mouse in each trouser pocket and wandered downstairs in search of a secret spot. So here we find that this narrator was finding or trying to find a empty room in this big hotel where he can just carry on with the training. And for this the narrator kept the mice in his trouser pocket and moved on searching for a secret spot. The ground floor of the hotel was a maze of public rooms, all of them named in gold letters on the doors. I wandered through the lodge and the card room and the reading room and the drawing room. None of them was empty. I went down a long wide corridor and at the end of it I came to the ballroom. There were double doors leading into it, and in front of the doors there was a large notice board on a stand. The notice on the board said, "This room is reserved for the annual meeting of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to the Children." So he found a ballroom by searching all the rooms in the downstairs. All the rooms in the downstairs was for the public uses, and he came across a room named the ballroom, where he found that this room was having two doors, and there was a notice board, and in the notice board it was written that this room was reserved for annual meeting of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. The double door into the room were open. I peeped in. It was a colossal room. There were rows and rows of chairs, all facing a platform. The chairs were painted gold and they had little red cushions on the seats. But there was not a soul in sight. So as you can see, he went into the room and found that it was a colossal room, and there was many chairs, and it was arranged in rows, and the chairs were painted gold, and it has red cushions on the seat. I slided into the room. He went inside the room. What a lovely secret place it was. It was a lovely secret place for him. The meeting of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children must have taken place earlier in these days, and now they had all gone home. Even if they hadn't, even if they did suddenly come pouring in, they would be wonderful, kind people who would look with a favor upon a young mouse trainer going about his business. So here the narrator is saying that he found that this room was lovely secret place to practice his training, and he guessed that the prevention of cruelty to the children, this meeting was already done, and if it was not done yet, then also he has no problem, because the people who are going to meet or conduct meeting for the prevention of cruelty to children will be good people, and they are not going to scold him, who will be in favor of the person or a boy who is a young mouse trainer and he is going to start his business. This was the thinking which was going on inside the mind of this narrator. At the back of the room there was a large folding screen with Chinese dragon painted on it. I decided, just to be on the safe side, to go behind the screen and do my training there. I wasn't a bit frightened of the prevention of cruelty to children people, but there was always a chance that Mr. Stranger, the manager, might pop his head round the door. If he did, and if he saw the mice, the poor thing would be in the hall porter's bucket of water before I could shout stop. So the narrator is saying that he has found a Chinese dragon curtain, and he will just go behind it and practice the training, because he is not frightened about the prevention of cruelty to children people, but he is frightened about Mr. Stranger's appearance to the room, and if he pop his head into the room, then he will be in danger, and he is going to just put the mice into the hall porter's bucket of water, and he will not able to do anything. I tiptoed to the back of the room and settled myself on the thick green carpet behind the big screen. What a splendid place this was, ideal for mouse training. I took William and Mary out of my trouser pockets. They sat beside me on the carpet, quiet and well behaved. So here the boy found a thick green carpet behind the big screen, where he found that this was the ideal place for mouse training, and he took out William and Mary from his pocket, and he just kept them beside him, and they were sitting beside him, quiet and well behaved. The trick I was going to teach them today was a tightrope walking. It is not all that difficult to train an intelligent mouse to be an expert tightrope walker, provided you know exactly how to go about it. First, you must have a piece of string. I had that. Then you must have some good cake. A fine currant cake is the favorite of white mice. They are dirty about it. I had brought with me a rock cake which I had pocketed the day before. So here the boy or the narrator planned to teach the mouse tightrope walking, and he thinks that if these mice are intelligent enough, and if he had a string, if he had some good food, say a cake which is a currant cake which is a favorite food of mice, which about which the mice are dirty, means slightly crazy. So if you have these all things, then it is very easy to teach them how to go through the or go or move on the tightrope. So he just pocket, means he just kept in his pocket the day before some cakes and some strings. Now here is what you do. You stretch the string tight between your two hands, but start by keeping it very short, only about 3 inches. You put the mouse on your right hand and a little piece of cake on your left hand. The mouse is therefore only 3 inches away from the cake. He can see it and he can smell it. His whiskers twitch with excitement. He can almost reach the cake by leaning forward, but not quite. He only has to take 2 steps along the string to reach the tasty morsel. He ventures forward one paw on the string, then the other. If the mouse has a good sense of balance, and most of them do, he will get across easily. I started with William. He worked the string without a moment's hesitation. I let him have a quick nibble of the cake just to whet his appetite. Then I put him back on the right hand. So here we find that the narrator started with the trick, and he started with William. When he just put William 3 inches away from the cake, and by smelling the cake, William just easily walked on this string, and by this the narrator was able to do the first trick with William. This time I landed the string and I made it about 6 inches long. William knew what to do now. With superb balance, he walked step by step along the string until he reached the cake. He was rewarded with another nibble. Now, in the next time, narrator just increased the length of the string and made it 6 inches long. Now, William already knows what to do and he easily balanced to move on the string, and for doing this the narrator has given him another nibble of cake. Now quite soon William was walking a 24-inch tightrope, or rather tight string, from one hand to the other to reach the cake. So now the next what we can see that now William was able to move on a 24-inch string and he just reached the cake. He was enjoying himself tremendously. I was careful to hold the string near the carpet so that if he did lose the balance, he would not have far to fall. But he never fell. William was obviously a natural acrobat, a great tightrope walking mouse. So here the narrator is saying that now the William or the mouse is also enjoying how to move on the string, and the narrator has held the string near the carpet so that if this mouse falls he is not get hurt. So but he never fell, this mouse never fell, and he assumed, or the narrator assumed him to be a natural acrobat. So now it was Mary's turn. So now William was trained. Now narrator is going to train Mary. Now it's Mary's turn. I put William on the carpet beside me and rewarded him with some extra crumbs and a currant. Then I started going through the same routine all over again with Mary. My blinding ambitions, you see, my dream of dreams was to become one day the owner of a white mouse circus. I would have a small strange red curtains in front of it, and when the curtains were drawn apart, the audience would see my world-famous performing mice walking on tightropes, swinging from trapezes, turning somersaults in the air, bouncing on trampolines, and all the rest of it. I would have white mice riding on white rats, and the rats would gallop furiously round and round the stage. I was beginning to picture myself traveling first class all over the globe with my famous white mouse circus and performing before the crowned heads of Europe. So here the narrator is dreaming of his white mouse circus where he is going to do all these tricks before the crowned heads of Europe. So this is the dream of narrator here, to be a owner of white mouse circus. With this we come to the end of this story. In the next class we will start with the question answers of this story. Till then, stay tuned, stay happy, and don't forget to subscribe this channel to get more videos on more chapters, and don't forget to click on the bell icon to get notification of newly uploaded videos. Thank you.